It was one of those quiet southern mornings where the air felt thick with dew, and the smell of fresh hay hung low across the fields. The sun had just begun to rise over the old Dawson family farm, casting golden light across the white farmhouse and the rusted red barn. It was peaceful, like something out of a postcard. But underneath that calm, something felt off. 12-year-old Maya Dawson stood barefoot on the front porch, her pink pajamas soaked at the cuffs from the wet grass. Her little sister, Layla, only 10, was right beside her, holding onto their shared kitten like it was the only safe thing left in the world. Their mom, Denise Dawson, had already been calling their names for 10 minutes straight, shouting from the edge of the cornfield like she was trying to wake up the dead. But there was no answer. Not from Rachel. Not from Joy. The older Dawson girls, Rachel, 17, and Joy, 15, had gone out just after sunrise to feed the goats and walk along the back creek, something they'd done every summer morning for as long as anyone could remember. But that morning, something went wrong. Their boots were found near the fence line, and Rachel's favorite red flannel lay draped over a tree branch, damp with morning mist. No signs of a struggle. No footprints. Nothing. Just silence. The small town of Brookville, tucked between the Tennessee hills and long-forgotten back roads, wasn't used to this kind of mystery. Folks left their doors unlocked. Neighbors knew one another's grandkids by name. So when the Dawson girls vanished without a trace, it was like the whole town held its breath and never let it go. The local sheriff, a weary old man named Ray McIntyre, launched a search the same day. Volunteers combed through the fields, dogs sniffed through the woods, and helicopters circled for hours. But after 2 weeks, with no sign of the girls, no phone pings, no clothing, no calls, the case went cold. Rachel and Joy had vanished like smoke in the wind. Denise never stopped believing they were alive. She said she could still feel them, like a string stretched across the distance that never quite snapped. The farm changed after that. The goats were sold off. The laughter died in the kitchen. Maya and Layla were homeschooled, and Denise stopped answering the door after sunset. 3 years later, in the middle of another slow summer, something strange happened. A local teen named Deshawn, who had just graduated high school, was out by the creek near the edge of the Dawson property. He wasn't from Brookville originally. He'd moved in with his grandmother after his mom passed. Deshawn had always kept to himself, spending his afternoons fishing or building things out of scrap he'd find around town. But that day, he brought a magnet and some rope with him, hoping to pull up old coins or tools from the waterbed, a little hobby he'd picked up off YouTube. He never expected what came up. At first, it felt like a tree branch or maybe an old fence post. But when he pulled harder, the magnet snapped upward, and something heavy broke the surface, tangled in moss and wire. It was a rusted lockbox. Small. Caked in mud. Locked tight. It made a loud thud when it hit the grass. Curious and a little nervous, Deshawn dragged it to the old shed behind the barn where he sometimes hung out. Inside, he cleaned it off, heart pounding. What could be inside? A stash? Old farm tools? Family photos? But when he finally pried the box open, what he found wasn't anything he could have prepared for. Inside, wrapped in a strip of torn red flannel, just like the one Rachel used to wear, was a small diary. The pages were warped and smudged, but the words still visible. And written across the first page, in rushed handwriting that seemed to tremble off the paper, was one sentence. "Don't trust the man in the hat." Deshawn froze. He hadn't heard that phrase in 3 years. Not since he first arrived in town and heard whispers about the Dawson girls and the search party that turned up empty-handed. He remembered seeing the flyers taped to gas station windows. He remembered the worn-out look in Denise's eyes at church. And now, somehow, the girls were reaching out from a box hidden in the very creek where they were last seen. But before Deshawn could read more, he heard the sound of footsteps behind him. Fast, heavy, coming straight for the shed. And then, everything went black. Meanwhile, across town, another moment of fate was unfolding. On a crowded city bus headed toward Nashville General Hospital, a white woman, visibly pregnant and looking exhausted, stepped on and found no empty seats. Until a black teen boy, Deshawn's cousin, Marcus, stood up and offered his seat with a tired smile. She took it with a grateful nod, but before getting off at her stop, she pressed a small folded note into his hand. Marcus didn't open it right away, but when he finally did, everything changed. And what that note said would shake the truth behind the Dawson mystery wide open. But that, we'll get to in the next part. Marcus sat on the back steps of his aunt's house, still holding that note. The afternoon sun burned warm across his arms, but he barely noticed. His heart beat faster the longer he stared at the small piece of paper. It was folded perfectly, like someone took care in how it was handed off. The handwriting was soft and slightly slanted, probably written in a rush, but still neat enough to read. He unfolded it slowly, fingers trembling without knowing why. It read, "You don't know me, but your kindness today just saved someone's life. Please go to the Dawson farm. Ask for Denise. Tell her about the man in the hat." That was it. No name, no number, nothing else. At first, Marcus figured it was some weird misunderstanding. The woman must have mixed him up with someone else. But the more he read it, the more it sat heavy in his chest. The words didn't feel random, they felt urgent. Like she knew something. And the mention of the Dawson farm wasn't just a coincidence. Everyone in the county had heard of what happened there. He walked back into the house, where his grandma was flipping through the news on her old kitchen TV. "You all right?" she asked without looking up. Marcus hesitated. "Grandma, what do you know about the Dawson girls?" The remote clicked silent. She turned and gave him a look. Not annoyed, just tired. "Why are you asking about that now?" Someone gave me a note on the bus. Told me to go there. Said something about the man in the hat." Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time since he moved in with her, Marcus saw a crack in her usual calm. She pressed her lips together like she was debating whether to speak. Then she sighed. "I knew Denise Dawson when we were kids," she said softly. "She was always the strong one. After her girls disappeared, she changed. Folks said she was losing it, but I think she just saw what others refused to." "What do you mean?" Marcus leaned forward. There was talk about someone creeping around those woods at night. A man in a wide-brim hat. Tall, always walking with a limp. People laughed it off. Said it was an old drunk or just stories to scare kids. She paused. But Denise never laughed. Marcus looked back down at the note. Whoever this woman was, she knew something. She mentioned the man in the hat like he was real. His grandma slowly nodded. Maybe he is. Back at the Dawson farm, the house felt quieter than ever. Denise stood in the living room, staring out the window toward the edge of the property. She hadn't spoken much since the sheriff's visit earlier that week. He came by with a box of old photos, asking again if she remembered any strange visitors around the time the girls disappeared. Same questions, same answers. Nothing changed. Layla sat at the kitchen table, drawing a flower with broken crayons while Maya scrolled through an old photo album. On the third page was a shot of Rachel, standing on the tractor, arms up like a superhero. Joy was behind her, rolling her eyes and laughing. It felt like a memory from a different life. Then the doorbell rang. It startled everyone. Denise moved slowly, almost like she didn't want to know who it was. She opened the door and saw Marcus standing there, holding the folded note in his hand. His face looked unsure, but kind. Familiar, in a way. "Can I help you?" Denise asked, her voice dry from hours without speaking. I don't know exactly how to say this, but someone told me to come here," Marcus said. "She gave me this note. On the bus." He handed it over. Denise took it slowly. Her eyes scanned the paper, and she immediately went pale. Her knees gave a little, and she reached for the wall to steady herself. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. But something in her changed. She stepped back and let Marcus in. "Come in," she said. "You better sit." Meanwhile, Deshawn slowly opened his eyes in the shed, the light blurry and spinning. His head throbbed with pain, and for a second, he couldn't remember where he was. But then he saw the open lockbox, the flannel, the diary, and the fact that it was missing. He tried to sit up, but something tugged at his ankle. A chain. Someone had locked his foot to an old pipe near the back wall. Panic hit him like a wave. Who did this?
Why?
He remembered the footsteps. Heavy.
Fast.
Someone who knew the shed. Someone who didn't want that box to be found. He tried yelling, but his voice cracked. The woods were quiet. No one was around. Then, from the shadows of the shed, a figure stepped out. Deshawn's breath caught in his throat. The man was tall, his face hidden by a wide-brim hat pulled low. His coat was old, dust-covered. His walk was uneven, with a limp that dragged one foot slightly behind the other. He didn't speak. He just stood there, like he was waiting for something. Deshawn stared at him, heart racing. The man finally spoke, voice rough like dry bark. You weren't supposed to find that box. Back at the Dawson house, Denise sat across from Marcus, the note in her lap. She'd read it 3 times and still couldn't make sense of how or why it had come to him. But the message, it felt real. Like her daughters were still reaching out, even after all these years. She finally looked up. Did the woman say anything else? Marcus shook his head. Just, she looked tired.
Scared.
Like she was being watched. She just slipped the note into my hand and got off the bus. Denise stood up and pulled a box from the closet. Inside were dozens of papers, police reports, maps, old drawings. She spread them out across the coffee table. Do you know what it means? Marcus asked. I think I do, she said softly, pointing to a sketch. It was of a man.
Tall.
Wide-brim hat. One leg shorter than the other. It was drawn by a neighbor's kid who claimed to see someone in the woods behind the barn the night the girls vanished. I always thought it was a story, she continued. But then we found scratches on the barn wall. A broken latch. Rachel's flannel hanging from a tree. It felt like someone was watching, waiting, and then they were gone. Marcus looked down at the drawing. Who is he? No one ever knew, she said. They called him the Hat Man, said he was part myth, part caution tale. But I think he's real. And I think he took my girls. Outside, the sun dipped low behind the trees, casting long shadows over the fields. Back in the shed, the man in the hat took one slow step toward Deshawn. He knelt down, face still hidden. You think you're helping someone, he said, voice cold. But all you're doing is digging up what should stay buried. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small recorder. Deshawn recognized it immediately. It was Rachel's. Her name scratched into the back with a key. The same one that had gone missing from the barn the morning she vanished. You want answers? The man said. Then listen close. Because once you know the truth, there's no turning back. He pressed play. A voice crackled through the static.
Faint.
Tired. But unmistakably young. If you're hearing this, we're still alive. Or we were.
He keeps us underground.
No light. No clocks. Just the sound of water and chains. The recording stopped. The man stood. And without another word, he turned and walked into the woods. Deshawn sat in the dark, chained and shaking. Somewhere, Rachel was still out there. And now he was part of the story. But he wasn't alone anymore. Back at the house, Denise looked at Marcus. Are you willing to help me? She asked, voice trembling. Marcus nodded. I don't know what's going on, he said, but if your daughters are still out there, then we have to find them. And just as he said it, Maya ran in from the other room, holding something in her hand. It was another note, folded the same way. But this one had been slipped through the crack in the front door, without anyone seeing who left it. Denise opened it with shaking hands. This one was typed. The clock is ticking. If you want to see them again, come alone. Midnight. Back Creek. Bring the box. Marcus and Denise looked at each other. The mystery had just deepened. And time was running out. The moon hung low over Brookville that night, barely peeking through a thin veil of clouds. Crickets sang in the distance, their rhythm broken only by the occasional bark of a dog or the low creak of the Dawson farmhouse's screen door swinging open. Denise stepped outside quietly, the weight of the lockbox in her hands and fear clinging to every breath she took. Midnight was less than an hour away, and her mind ran in loops. Memories of her daughters laughing in the yard, their boots by the back door, the sound of joy humming while feeding the goats. And now, a letter telling her to come alone. To bring the box. She hadn't even told the sheriff about the second note. Something deep inside told her she couldn't trust anyone outside this circle anymore. Inside, Marcus sat on the floor, watching over Maya and Layla as they dozed off in front of the TV. He was supposed to stay behind. That was the plan. But every bone in his body told him not to let Denise go alone. He tapped on his phone, trying to reach Deshawn again, but the call wouldn't go through. Still no sign of him. Still no explanation for where he'd gone. Across town, Deshawn sat in the corner of the shed, trying to stay awake. His ankles still chained, his back sore from leaning against the splintered wall. The recorder was gone now.
Taken.
But what he heard echoed in his mind. Rachel's voice, weak but alive, describing a place underground, full of water and darkness. He tried everything to loosen the chain, but whoever locked it was smart. They'd done this before. And then, faintly, he heard something. A soft whisper outside. Someone moving in the grass. "Hello," he called out. "Please help me." There was no answer. Just footsteps. Then silence. Suddenly, a small rock rolled across the floor near him. He looked down and saw a key tied to a piece of fishing line. It stopped right in front of his foot. Someone was helping him. He grabbed the key with shaky hands, heart pounding as he worked it into the lock. It took 3 tries, but the chain finally gave way. He crawled toward the door, but just before he could push it open, he saw a figure dart past the window. A girl. Blonde hair. Barefoot.
It was Joy.
Or someone who looked like her. "Wait," he shouted, bursting out into the night. But she was gone again. Like smoke. Back at the Dawson farm, Denise slipped into her truck and drove slowly down the dirt path leading to the back creek. The tires crunched gravel in the quiet. Every tree she passed felt like it held eyes. Every rustle in the leaves made her tighten her grip on the steering wheel. The box sat in the passenger seat, still sealed, still heavy with the weight of the past. She reached the edge of the woods and turned off the engine. She stepped out, holding only a flashlight and the box. The path was narrow, lined with tall grass and old fence posts. Somewhere nearby, a stream bubbled over stones, the same stream where the box had been pulled from days earlier. She could hear frogs, the low call of an owl, and her own heartbeat loud in her ears. Then, from behind a tree, a voice. "You brought it." Denise spun around, flashlight beaming toward the voice. A man stepped out of the shadows. Not the man in the hat, but someone else. Younger. Tall, maybe mid-30s. A long scar ran across his neck. He raised his hand slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "I'm here to warn you." "Who are you?" she asked, voice shaking. "They call me Jacob. I used to work for him." The man in the hat. Years ago. Before I knew what he really was. Jacob looked around nervously. "He doesn't kill them. Not right away. He keeps them underground. Tries to break them." Denise's breath caught. "My girls, are they still alive?" "I think so. But they won't be for long. You're getting too close." The magnet, the box, it stirred things up. He doesn't like people digging into what's his. "What does he want?" she asked. Jacob pointed at the box. "That's what he wants. What's inside it. But not because of the diary. Because of what's underneath it." Denise blinked. "Underneath? You haven't opened the false bottom?" Before she could answer, a branch snapped behind them. Jacob's eyes widened. "It's too late. You need to go.
Now."
Back at the house, Marcus finally made up his mind. He grabbed his jacket, tucked a flashlight into his pocket, and stepped out into the night. He followed the same dirt path Denise had taken, only slower, listening for every sound. Something about the whole thing felt wrong. Too many coincidences. Too many warnings. Then, just as he reached the edge of the property, he saw a light flash from the woods. Once, then twice. Someone was signaling. He ducked low and moved toward it. Meanwhile, Deshawn ran through the woods, following the trail the girl left behind. His clothes were soaked from creek water, and scratches covered his arms from low branches. Every now and then he thought he saw her again just ahead, turning a corner looking back. And then suddenly he stopped. There, half covered in ivy, was a door. A trapdoor. Bolted shut. Rusted over. Hidden deep in the hillside. He knelt and wiped away the leaves. Just as he reached for the latch, he heard whispering. Not from outside, but from below. Voices. Girls. He leaned closer. Rachel, he whispered. And from below, a soft reply. Help us. His heart dropped. They were alive. But he didn't know how much time they had left. At the creek, Denise backed away as Jacob disappeared into the trees. The flashlight flickered. She looked down at the box, now feeling like it burned in her hands. She opened it again, moved the flannel aside, and noticed the edge of something beneath the false bottom, just like Jacob said. She peeled it back. Underneath was a small pouch wrapped in plastic. Inside was a photograph. It showed a man, young, maybe late 20s, standing in front of the Dawson barn years ago. And beside him, holding his hand, was Rachel. Denise's knees buckled. It was someone they knew. Someone who'd been there all along. And just as the pieces started to fall into place, the flashlight died. She turned to run, but footsteps thundered behind her. The last thing she heard was the sound of someone whispering in her ear. You were warned. And the forest swallowed her whole. The air grew heavier by the minute, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. Marcus moved carefully through the dark, the beam of his flashlight bouncing across the ground. His phone buzzed in his pocket. 1 bar of service, a single message from Deshawn. Asterisk, I found them. Underground. Hurry. Asterisk, his heart raced. He had no idea where exactly Deshawn was, but that message confirmed it. This wasn't just a story anymore. This was real. Rachel and Joy were alive, and someone didn't want them to be found. He reached the creek and saw Denise's truck sitting empty, driver's door wide open. The lockbox was gone. So was she. Denise, he called out. Nothing. Just the sound of water running over rocks and trees rustling above. He turned in a slow circle, every shadow looking like it might move. He followed broken twigs and fresh prints through the dirt, heading toward the deeper part of the woods. Back in the hills, Deshawn knelt beside the trapdoor, the voices below growing faint, like they were slipping farther away. He'd tried the latch already, rusted shut. He pulled a rock from nearby and slammed it down again and again. The old hinges groaned, but didn't give. His hands were bloody, arms shaking. Just hang on, he whispered. Don't stop talking. I'm gonna get you out. Then, he heard footsteps behind him. Fast, heavy, coming straight toward him. He turned just in time to see someone charge from the trees. The flashlight fell. Hands grabbed his shoulders and threw him back against the hillside. He fought, throwing elbows and kicks, but the figure pinned him fast. A shadow towered over him. Wide-brimmed hat pulled low, face hidden by dark cloth, eyes like burning coals in the night. You should have left it alone, the voice hissed. Deshawn kicked again and scrambled back, reaching for a branch. The man lunged, but a flash of light caught his side. Marcus, charging in from the brush, swung his flashlight hard against the man's head. The figure grunted and stumbled back, then disappeared into the trees like smoke. Deshawn gasped for breath, heart hammering. He was here. The man in the hat. That was him. Marcus dropped beside him, grabbing his arm. Where's Denise? I don't know, but I heard the girls. They're under here.
He pointed to the trapdoor.
We have to get them out now. Back at the creek, Denise woke up on cold dirt, a sharp pain pulsing in the side of her head. Her flashlight was gone. The woods were silent again. She sat up slowly, trying to make sense of the shadows around her. The lockbox was still clutched in her arms, the photo still inside. Whoever had attacked her hadn't taken it. They wanted her to see what was inside, but not to survive long enough to do anything with it. She pulled herself up using a tree trunk, her balance unsteady. Something in her gut said time was running out. The man in the hat wasn't just trying to hide the past. He was making sure no one lived to expose it. And now, with Jacob gone and the girls so close, she knew this might be her only chance to end it. She limped back toward the property, flashlight long dead, the trees around her whispering like they knew secrets she wasn't supposed to hear. Every twig snap felt like a warning. Meanwhile, deep underground, Rachel pressed her ear to the ceiling. She could hear the banging above.
Joy.
Someone's here. Her voice cracked,
Her throat dry.
Joy sat in the corner, eyes sunken, holding a tattered scrap of cloth that had once been a scarf. It had been days since their last drop of food. Water still trickled through the cracks in the wall, but their hope had dried up weeks ago. "I heard it too," Joy said, her voice barely a whisper. "That was metal. That was close." Rachel moved to the door, a heavy slab of rusted steel that hadn't budged since the day they were taken. They had tried to mark time, scratching lines into the wall with a rock. But after a while, even that stopped making sense. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from above. Dust fell from the ceiling. And then daylight. A shaft of light broke through as the trapdoor began to peel open. Screws snapped. Wood split. Rachel covered her eyes, blinking into the sudden brightness. "Rachel." Deshawn's voice rang out. She burst into tears. "We're here." Marcus reached down, grabbing the edge of the opening. But before he could say another word, gunshots cracked through the woods. A bullet struck the tree beside him, sending bark flying. Another hissed past Deshawn's leg. They dropped fast, crawling for cover. The man in the hat had returned, and he wasn't alone. From the shadows stepped another figure. A woman this time, older, wearing a black coat, eyes cold and focused. She didn't speak, just raised her weapon again. Marcus pulled Deshawn behind a log. "There's two of them." "No, there's more," Deshawn said breathlessly. "Jacob told me. It's not just him. It's a group. They've been doing this for years. Taking kids, hiding them in places no one thinks to look." "What do they want?" "I don't know," he said. "But they're protecting something." Across the ridge, Denise pushed through the underbrush and saw the figures by the trapdoor. She ducked low and circled around the back, heart racing. Her eyes locked on the man in the hat, something about his limp, the way he turned his head. Familiar. Like a ghost she'd seen before. And then it hit her. She knew who he was. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the photo again. The same face. Just younger. Clean-shaven. Dressed like one of the old farm hands who used to work summers in exchange for cash and meals. His name was Charles. He'd worked for them when Rachel was 9. And then one day, he just vanished. He'd never left. He'd been watching all along. Denise stood, rage boiling in her chest, and shouted, "Charles, I know it's you." The man in the hat turned slowly. His face tightened beneath the cloth. And for the first time, he spoke Denise's name. "You should have stayed quiet." He raised his weapon. Before he could fire, a third figure charged from the side, Jacob, bleeding and limping but alive. He tackled Charles to the ground, yelling, "Run. Get them out." Deshawn and Marcus jumped up and yanked open the door. The girls were weak but alive, eyes wide with shock as fresh air hit their skin. Rachel climbed out first, falling into Deshawn's arms. Joy followed, her legs shaking beneath her. Behind them, chaos exploded, yelling, more gunshots, the sound of feet scrambling through the leaves. Jacob screamed. Denise ran toward the trapdoor, waving the box. "I've got the proof. They can't hide anymore." The woman in black turned and ran. Charles vanished again into the shadows. Marcus helped carry Joy toward the road as Rachel clung to Deshawn. None of them spoke. No one had words left. The trapdoor hung open behind them, revealing a staircase descending into blackness, deeper than they could see. Whatever was down there wasn't done yet. And this story? It was only just reaching the edge of the truth. Sirens echoed in the distance now, growing louder, closer, but not fast enough. The woods were still alive with the crackling of broken branches, the echo of boots running over wet ground. Marcus kept glancing back over his shoulder as he and Deshawn guided Joy toward the main road. Rachel clutched Denise's arm tightly, eyes locked on the tree line, half expecting the man in the hat to come lunging back out of the dark. But he didn't. Instead, something else happened. A low rumble came from beneath their feet. The ground shook gently, like something shifting far below. Then it stopped. Everyone froze, eyes wide, holding their breath. The trapdoor that had just been yanked open with so much force suddenly slammed shut on its own. No wind, no person near it, just a violent, final snap, like the earth had taken back whatever it had let out. "What was that?" Rachel whispered, her voice hoarse. "I don't know," Deshawn said, still catching his breath. "But whatever's under there isn't natural." Jacob lay motionless near the treeline, blood soaking into the dirt. Denise ran to him, falling to her knees. His eyes fluttered open for just a moment. "They're not done," he said weakly. "The trapdoor, it's just one of many." "What do you mean?" Denise asked, clutching his hand. "There's more than one site," Jacob whispered. "Different properties. Farms. Schools. Abandoned homes. They move them around. Underground tunnels. They've been doing this for decades." Denise stared at him in horror. "The girls were just part of something bigger?" Jacob nodded faintly. "He's not the only one in the hat. There's more like him.
Some of them wear masks.
Some don't.
It's a group.
Wealthy. Connected. They call themselves the Harvest." Then, his hand slipped from hers, and he stopped breathing. Deshawn stepped forward, stunned. "The Harvest? What the hell is that?" Denise stood up slowly, shaking. "I don't know, but if this is organized, if they're moving kids between sites, then this wasn't just about Rachel and Joy. This could be happening across the whole state." Marcus's phone buzzed again. A blocked number. He answered it with shaking hands. A woman's voice came through.
Calm.
Precise. "You have something that belongs to us," she said. "If you value your family, return the box. Tonight." Marcus froze. "Who is this?" The call ended. He looked up, pale. "They know we have the box." Denise reached into her coat and pulled it out again. The same photo still inside. But as she peeled back the bottom, she noticed something else, something she hadn't seen before. A slit between the layers of the box's base. She pulled at it carefully, revealing a tiny black memory card hidden between two panels. She slid it into her phone. A video loaded instantly. It was grainy at first, time-stamped 4 years ago. The camera sat on a table, unmoving. Then, people entered the frame. Men in suits. A woman in medical scrubs. And in the middle, Rachel, tied to a chair, crying. Denise gasped and dropped the phone. Rachel turned pale. "That's the first place they took me. Right after I was grabbed. They called it the assessment room." The video kept playing, and the voices became clear. "We'll keep this one," one of the men said. "She's strong." The others, "Move them to Sector B." "Already arranged," another replied. "Brookville's site is secure. Next transport leaves Monday." Rachel trembled. They were planning transfers like we were shipments. Deshawn picked up the phone and quickly hit record on his own. "We have to show this to someone. The media, the FBI, anybody." Marcus was still stuck on the call he just got. "They're watching us. That woman knew I had the box. That means they have ears in town. Maybe even in law enforcement." Denise looked back toward the woods. "We can't go home. Not now." Then, just as she said it, Maya and Layla came running from the trail. Marcus had told them to stay back at the house, but they must have followed. Layla was crying. Maya was yelling.
"Mom."
"There's a car at the house." 2 men went inside. Denise's heart dropped. Marcus looked at the others. "They're already moving. This wasn't about scaring us, it's cleanup. They're tying up loose ends." Everyone stood frozen for a moment, realization settling in like ice water. There was no going back now. The trapdoor was shut. Jacob was dead. And someone, maybe several people, knew they were coming after the truth. Rachel suddenly turned to Marcus. "There's a place. One of the other girls told me about it. Before she disappeared. She said there was a safe house. Hidden near the state line. A man named Elliot. He used to be one of them, but left. He helped her once." "Where is it?" Marcus asked. "I don't know exactly," Rachel said. "But she gave me a word. Said it would be on a mailbox. If you ever need help, Look for the one that says Larkspur. Denise's eyes locked with Rachel's. Then that's where we go. Behind them, red and blue lights began to flash between the trees. But they didn't feel like rescue. They felt like surveillance. Joy's voice cracked softly as she asked the question they were all thinking. If they've been watching us this whole time, how do we know who to trust? No one had an answer. And up in the distance, beyond the creek, a single mailbox stood crooked on a lonely road. Painted on the side, faded but still readable, was one word: Larkspur. But no one knew what, or who, waited beyond it. The old country road twisted between trees and hills as Denise's truck bumped along, headlights slicing through the thick Tennessee fog. Marcus drove in silence, eyes flicking toward every shadow that passed, while Deshawn held the memory card tightly in his palm like it might vanish at any second. In the back seat, Rachel and Joy sat pressed together, their hands clutched, bruises still fresh, eyes wide and alert. Denise kept glancing in the side mirror, watching for headlights that didn't belong. It took them over an hour to find it, a crooked little mailbox halfway buried in weeds with the word Larkspur painted faintly in peeling white letters. A gravel path curved behind it into a dense patch of woods, barely visible from the road. They sat there for a moment, engine humming, everyone too quiet. "You think he's still alive?" Marcus asked, eyes locked on the path. Rachel nodded slowly. She said Elliot doesn't talk much, but he listens. And he's not part of them anymore. Denise took a breath. Then let's hope that's still true. They followed the path slowly until it opened into a small clearing. A single cabin stood at the center, half swallowed by trees and ivy. Smoke rose from the chimney. There were no cars. No lights. Marcus stepped out first, cautious. "Elliot," he called. The door creaked open before he reached it. A man appeared, mid-50s, tall, gray beard, and dark eyes that studied them carefully. He said nothing at first, just looked at Rachel and Joy like he already knew who they were. "You brought the memory card?" he finally asked. Deshawn nodded and held it up. Elliot stepped aside. "Get in."
Quickly.
"They'll come." Inside the cabin was quiet, sparse. A fire burned low in the corner. Maps were pinned to the walls. Strings connected photographs, documents, symbols. It looked like the inside of someone's war room. Elliot sat at an old desk and inserted the memory card into a laptop. The footage played, Rachel in the chair, the men, the woman in scrubs. Voices crisp. Locations mentioned. Names exchanged. Marcus leaned closer and whispered, "This is enough to blow it all open." Elliot nodded. "It's more than enough. They won't be able to silence this. Not this time." Denise sat across from him. How do we release it?" "I already have a setup," Elliot said. "Encrypted satellite line. I can broadcast the video to dozens of independent outlets. If I send it out, they won't be able to kill it." Rachel hesitated. "If you do that, won't they come for you?" He looked at her and smiled faintly. "They already have. But I'm still here." Suddenly, headlights lit up the cabin walls. A car pulling into the clearing. Everyone froze. Marcus grabbed the curtain and peeked out. "It's them," he said. "Same black SUV that was at the house." Elliot didn't flinch. "We stall them. 10 more seconds and the video is live." They could hear doors slam shut. Boots on gravel. Voices outside, calm, steady. Then came the knock. 3 hard bangs on the door. Elliot typed faster. A green light blinked on the screen. "Video's out," he whispered. "They can't bury it now." Then, from the other side of the door, a woman's voice. "Open the door. No one has to get hurt." Rachel stood slowly. "That's her. The woman in black." Elliot walked to the door and unlocked it, but didn't open it. "You're too late," he called out. "It's over." A long pause. Then the woman laughed. "Over? You have no idea what you've started." Suddenly, the window shattered. A smoke canister flew into the room, hissing. Everyone ducked, coughing, eyes burning. Marcus pulled Denise and the girls toward the back door. Elliot grabbed a revolver from the drawer.
"Go," he said.
"There's a tunnel under the shed." leads out to the woods. I'll hold them. They bolted through the back, smoke trailing behind them, gunshots cracking as the front door burst open. Marcus found the shed and yanked the door open. A hatch sat beneath the floorboards. He pried it loose and helped everyone down into the narrow crawl space. Just as he closed the hatch above them, they heard shouting. Get the card. They've already sent it. Find the girls. The tunnel was cold, damp, and pitch black, but it kept going. Denise led the way, flashlight shaking in her hand. Behind them, the sound of boots echoed from above. But they didn't stop. They crawled and pushed forward until finally, the tunnel opened into the woods behind the ridge. Morning light peeked through the trees. Birds chirped. Everything felt too quiet again. Deshawn helped Rachel out of the tunnel, then Joy. Marcus followed last, his hands raw and scraped. Denise turned to look at the cabin in the distance. No longer a safe house, now just another ghost in the woods. Sirens could be heard now, real ones this time. An hour later, in the town square, news trucks gathered in a frenzy. Screens showed the footage from the memory card. Headlines scrolled across every channel. Asterisk, underground network exposed. Asterisk. Asterisk, teen girls held for years in secret facility. Asterisk. Asterisk, whistleblower video goes viral. FBI launches federal probe. Asterisk. Reporters swarmed. Agents arrived. And the Dawson family finally told their story in front of cameras. But just when it felt like the nightmare was over, a final twist came. 2 days later, while authorities searched the collapsed tunnel near the Dawson property, they found a hidden chamber deeper underground. Not just one room, but several. Rows of empty beds. A locked storage unit. And inside it, folders. Hundreds of them. Each labeled with a name. Not just girls. Boys too. Some as young as 6. Files going back 30 years. And tucked into the last folder, an envelope addressed to Denise Dawson. Inside it was a photo.
Of Joy.
Taken just 3 days before she vanished. In the background of the photo stood the woman in black, smiling. She'd been in their lives long before they even knew her name. And the words scrawled on the back of the photo chilled Denise to her bones. Asterisk, you saved too. But there are so many more. Asterisk. The nightmare wasn't over. It had only just begun. The sun had barely risen above the horizon when Denise stood outside what used to be the old Dawson barn, now surrounded by yellow police tape and federal agents in black windbreakers. The property was no longer just a farm. It was a crime scene. But more than that, it had become the center of a nationwide investigation that rocked the country within hours of the footage being leaked. News vans lined the rural road, reporters speaking into microphones as the world watched Brookville unravel a mystery buried for years. The keyword Dawson Girls Found Alive trended across every major platform, with related searches exploding. Underground child trafficking network, Man in the Hat mystery, Black teen hero saves missing girls, and The Harvest. What started as a terrifying local tragedy had become something far bigger, an awakening. Inside the farmhouse, Denise sat at the table where she used to pack her girls' lunches. Across from her sat an FBI agent, a woman named Talia Monroe. Her voice was calm, her presence grounding, but her eyes betrayed the same disbelief everyone was feeling. We're going to be digging for weeks, maybe months, Talia said, flipping through her notes. But based on what we've already found, you were right. Your daughters weren't the only ones. Not by a long shot. Denise didn't answer. She stared out the window at the fields, remembering when Joy used to race the goats across the pasture and Rachel used to pretend the old tractor was her spaceship. Now those memories were tangled with the horror of what had really happened in the shadows of their home. I just want to know how, Denise said finally, voice low. How could this happen here for so long and no one ever saw a thing? Talia sighed. This group, the Harvest, they're smart.
Strategic.
They don't leave tracks. They recruit people already in power, officials, landowners, even doctors. We think they moved the kids through a network of rural properties and used old tunnels from Prohibition-era smuggling routes. Most of it was under the radar, and no one would suspect a family farm. Denise looked over at the lockbox still sitting on the counter. If it weren't for that magnet. It was fate, Talia said. Or maybe your daughters were meant to come back and expose it. Just down the road, Marcus and Deshawn sat on the tailgate of Deshawn's truck, watching workers dig through the old woodshed. The shed that once held only tools and memories had become the first place law enforcement found physical evidence of the tunnel system: trapdoors, chains, recordings, photos. It was all there. Marcus stared at the field, still processing everything. You think they'll catch her? The woman in black. Deshawn shook his head. Not yet. She's one of the top names on the list, but she knew when to disappear. That's how these people work. They vanish when you shine the light on them. But they can't run forever. The sound of an engine pulled their attention. Rachel and Joy walked over from the house, both wrapped in FBI-issued jackets, trying to look normal even though everything around them had changed. Rachel smiled faintly. I never thought I'd see this place again. Not like this. You saved a lot of people, Deshawn said, his voice soft. You coming forward, all that evidence, your story. You exposed something massive. Rachel looked away, almost embarrassed. I didn't do it alone. If Marcus hadn't taken the note, if Deshawn hadn't followed the creek. Joy cut in, voice stronger than anyone expected. If Mom hadn't believed we were still alive. Marcus watched them both. That woman on the bus, she knew everything. She started all of this. Rachel nodded slowly. She was one of us. I think her name was Sarah. They moved her the week before I escaped. She must have gotten out. And she wanted someone to know what really happened. Later that afternoon, media outlets confirmed the FBI had found over 40 locations with connections to the underground trafficking network. Most were in quiet rural towns, places no one would ever suspect. Old schools, farms, bunkers built under sheds and garages. The network had operated for nearly 3 decades under the cover of small-town life and forgotten buildings. And now, for the first time, their names were being exposed. More families came forward, recognizing photos from the files. Faces they'd given up hoping to see again. Some found closure. Others found new hope. One evening, Denise stood on her porch as a car pulled into the driveway. Out stepped a man in his late 50s, gray hair, trembling hands. He looked up at her, eyes red. I'm Eli Morales, he said, voice cracking. That folder with the name, Sophia Morales, that's my daughter. She disappeared in 2009. I just wanted to thank you. If it weren't for your girls, we never would have known. Denise hugged him tightly, without saying a word. That night, Rachel stood out in the backyard, staring at the stars. Marcus joined her, hands in his pockets. Do you ever think about what comes next? She asked. All the time, he said. But I think it starts with making sure this never happens again. Telling the truth. Even when it's uncomfortable. Rachel nodded. We lived in silence for so long. Now that we have a voice, I don't want to waste it. Deshawn showed up minutes later, holding his phone. It's official, he said. We've been asked to speak at the state hearing next week. They want first-hand testimony. A survivor, a rescuer, and a witness. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Guess that's us. Rachel looked at them both. Then let's go tell them everything. In the weeks that followed, the investigation continued to grow. Arrests were made. Officials who had looked the other way were removed from office. A special task force named Project Creeklight was launched to keep searching for survivors and sites nationwide. The story of the harvest became one of the most shared and searched stories online, inspiring documentaries, podcasts, and justice campaigns. But despite the victory, the Dawson family never returned to normal. Some scars ran too deep. Joy had nightmares for weeks. Rachel struggled with crowds. Denise took down every mirror in the house. But what kept them going was purpose. They started a foundation, the Larkspur Project, named after the word that led them to safety. It helped families of missing children, funded rural investigations, and partnered with independent journalists to keep the truth in the light. As for Marcus, he became known as the boy who changed everything with one small act of kindness, giving up his bus seat. That moment led to uncovering a secret hidden for years. News outlets called him the Magnet Kid for how a simple magnet and a curious spirit led to the unraveling of something so dark. Months later, he received a letter. No name, no return address. Just a single note written on soft, slanted handwriting. You did what others couldn't. You saw beyond the surface. Keep pulling. There's more beneath. Taped to the inside of the envelope was a tiny, rusted key. He didn't know what it opened, but somehow he knew he'd find out when the time was right. And somewhere, in a place still untouched by headlines or sirens, the woman in black stood at a quiet train station, watching passengers board. She held a newspaper under her arm, the headline reading, "From Creek to Congress, Survivors Bring Down Underground Network." She smiled faintly and walked toward the last car. There were more secrets, and she wasn't done hiding them, but neither were they done uncovering the truth.